Night in New Orleans wrapped itself like a sheet of black velvet. The damp air rolling off the Mississippi clung to the skin, a whispered reminder that in this city every secret eventually sweats out. Marcus Ellington stood before the cracked mirror of a cheap mid-city motel bathroom, staring at the stranger staring back. A worn brown corduroy jacket from a thrift store, a faded plaid shirt with fraying seams, jeans bleached pale from age, work boots with split leather and rubber soles, nearly gone flat, a pair of thick, outdated glasses with scratched lenses. A single day's worth of stubble roughened his jaw, dulling the sharp lines of a face once splashed across the cover of glossy business magazines. Mac, he murmured, testing the alias with a deeper, rougher tone. No longer Marcus the billionaire, entrepreneur who headlined tech summits in Austin, who mingled at charity galas in Atlanta, who closed billion-dollar deals in Manhattan. Tonight he was simply Mac, a black man with nothing more than second-hand clothes and a tired face. The kind of man who could slip into a restaurant and never raise an eyebrow. Marcus wiped the steam from the glass, leaned in, and examined the illusion. Convincing enough, this ritual of disguise, this pilgrimage back to anonymity, had become his way of testing the truth. No investors, no advisors, no staff rehearsed to flatter him, just raw human nature laid bare. Ellington Group, the empire. He had built brick by digital brick, spanned real estate, logistics, tech platforms, and a chain of luxury restaurants known as Hearth and Harbor. The quarterly reports, compiled and delivered by his coup Jordan Price, were immaculate, double-digit margins, flawless customer satisfaction scores, glowing supply chain audits. To immaculate, Marcus had learned young that numbers themselves don't lie, but the people behind them often do. He didn't need spreadsheets tonight. He needed to hear the pulse of one of his jewels without the varnish, the Magnolia Flame. His flagship New Orleans steakhouse had shattered revenue records. Celebrities posted photos under its chandeliers. Food critics whispered reverently about its imperial ribeye. But Marcus wanted to see it through different eyes, the eyes of a man who, by every surface measure, didn't belong there. He left the motel, walking past mid-city's cracked sidewalks and narrow porches. Trumpet notes from a balcony jazz band floated into the humid night. Gumbo broth and frying oil perfumed the breeze. New Orleans was jazz itself, unpredictable, syncopated, sometimes dissonant, always alive. Marcus loved that offbeat rhythm. It reminded him of who he was before the boardrooms and private jets dictated his every breath. His phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. Cue to update. Magnolia Flame still top performer. No deviations. Marcus slipped it back into his pocket. The numbers could wait. Tonight wasn't about charts, it was about seeing what those numbers tried to hide. At the corner, a taxi splashed through a puddle, dirty water slapping the curb. Marcus sidestepped just in time, chuckling to himself, in this disguise, even being splattered felt grounding. To find honesty, sometimes you had to accept a little dirt. The Magnolia Flame rose before him like a stage. Dark wooden doors framed in polished brass. Twin lanterns cast a warm halo of gold. A minimalist magnolia emblem gleamed under the street lamps. Through the tall windows he glimpsed soft amber light. Men in tailored suits, women in silk gowns. Crystal glasses raised mid-laughter. Marcus paused, tugged his jacket collar, lowered his thick glasses. Then he pushed through the door. The city's noise vanished. In its place, the perfume of seared beef, oak smoke from the fireplace, leather, and expensive cologne. A small jazz trio murmured from the corner. Silver cutlery chimed against porcelain. The air was curated elegance. He had paid for this theater. Tonight he came to see if the play was honest. The hostess, a tall blonde with a practiced smile, glanced over his clothes. Her expression flickered just long enough to betray judgment, before resuming its polished brightness. "Good evening. Can I help you?" she asked, voice sugared but edged. "A table for one," Marcus replied, lowering his tone, stripping it of the authority that usually commanded rooms. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." He met her eyes calmly. "Is that a problem?" Her smile stretched half an inch wider. "We're usually fully booked. Let me see what I can do." Her manicured fingers tapped the tablet. Exaggerated movements meant to show effort. Marcus noted it all. In a gilded mirror behind her, he caught the reflection of a man in a charcoal suit, sharp profile, predatory eyes gesturing at the bar staff with clipped precision. "We have a small table near the kitchen," the hostess said. "That's all that's available." A brush off. Marcus gave a small nod. "That's fine." She led him past chandeliers and linen-draped tables, past couples murmuring over wine, men with gold cufflinks glancing up with mild disdain at his boots. Their curiosity was polite, their judgment quiet, but both cut just the same. He was an anomaly in their curated world, a weed in a rose garden. His table sat tucked against a wood-paneled wall, beside the swinging kitchen doors. Every few seconds, the door banged open, spilling out shouts, clattering pans, sizzling oil. The table wobbled slightly, the tablecloth uneven. For Marcus, it was perfect. From here, invisible, he could watch the show unfold. The hostess vanished. Moments later, a young waitress approached Naomi Carter. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, loose curls escaping down her temple. Her smile was polite, but her eyes carried storms she couldn't quite hide. Her black, slip-resistant shoes were cracked at the edges, soles worn flat from endless shifts. "Good evening," Naomi said softly. "I'm Naomi. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Would you like water or sparkling to start?" Marcus looked directly at her. "The cheapest beer you've got." No flicker of annoyance, no judgment, just a steady nod as she scribbled it down. "Of course, I'll be right back. Would you like me to tell you about tonight's specials?" Marcus studied her for a beat longer. That steadiness, that refusal to dismiss him, was rarer than any ribeye on the menu. The kitchen door swung open again. The man in the charcoal suit, Victor Harlan. The manager scanned the floor with hawk-like vigilance. His eyes landed on Marcus for a half-second, sharp and assessing, then shifted away. His jaw tightened as he barked an order at a passing busboy, sending the boy scurrying. Authority radiated from him like static electricity. Naomi returned with the beer, cold, foamy, ordinary. Marcus sipped it, set it down, and opened the menu. Pages of prime cuts and pedigreed suppliers gleamed. At the very top, imperial ribeye, $500. The signature, the crown jewel. Marcus felt his pulse steady. This was the moment. Numbers were clean, reports spotless. But what he was about to order wasn't just a steak. It was the push of a button, the start of a test that could unravel an empire. Naomi appeared again, pen ready. "Are you ready to order, sir?" Marcus folded the menu. "The imperial ribeye and a glass of wine, whichever you recommend." For the briefest instant, Naomi's throat tightened. Everyone in this restaurant knew what that order meant, but her voice didn't waver. "Yes, sir. I'll put that in right away." She turned toward the bar, across the room. Victor Harlan's head snapped up. His gaze followed her like a knife. He muttered something, his hand gripping the counter until his knuckles turned white. Naomi hesitated. Only a second, then walked briskly toward the kitchen. Marcus leaned back, the kitchen door swinging open and shut like a metronome ticking down to something inevitable. He wasn't here for the food. He was here for the truth. And before the night was over, the truth would arrive folded into a napkin for words that would rattle everything he had built. The magnolia flame ran like a machine designed to impress. Every detail, from the faint scent of sandalwood drifting from the vents to the precise clink of cutlery, was calibrated to remind diners that they were inside an exclusive world. But Marcus Ellington, sitting at the wobbling table near the swinging kitchen doors, saw more than polished surfaces. He saw the gears. Naomi Carter returned with a tray, carefully setting a chilled glass of water alongside his beer. "Your wine will be out shortly," she said. The smile was still there, but Marcus caught the faint tremor in her hands as she placed the napkin down. He wondered if it was exhaustion, nerves, or both. The door to the kitchen burst open again. The clamor of pots and shouted orders spilled into the dining room. Before the door swung closed with a thud, from Marcus's vantage point, he could see snippets of chaos-line cooks moving like soldiers, flames leaping from pans, sweat shining under the harsh kitchen lights. But what held his attention wasn't the noise. It was the man orchestrating it. Victor Harlan, the manager, mid-40s, hair slicked back, suit sharper than the knives his staff carried. His gaze was quick, predatory, scanning every detail. When Naomi passed by with Marcus's order, Victor stepped into her path. His mouth barely moved, but his words sliced the air. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. Naomi lowered her eyes. "Table 30 to place the order, Mr. Harlan. That's the imperial ribeye. Do you see what he looks like? He can't pay for that." Marcus, watching from a distance, saw Naomi stiffen. For a moment, he expected her to falter, to apologize, to redirect the order. That's what most servers would have done. But then she lifted her eyes. Not defiantly, not recklessly, just steady, as though reminding herself that dignity was still hers to claim. "I'll take responsibility," she whispered. Victor's nostrils flared. He leaned closer, blocking her from view. The busboy passing nearby nearly collided with him and bolted at a single glance. "If this backfires," Victor muttered, "it's your job on the line. Do you understand me?" Naomi nodded quickly and disappeared into the kitchen. Marcus leaned back in his chair, masking his intrigue with a slow sip of beer. He had come tonight expecting shallow courtesies, perhaps a hint of greed or contempt. He hadn't expected a manager so quick to judge, and a waitress who, despite obvious fear, chose to treat him with fairness. A waiter in a tux passed his table, barely sparing him a glance, heading toward a group of businessmen in tailored suits. Their laughter was loud, their conversation filled with stock tips and golf scores. Marcus recognized the type. He had sat at those tables countless times, once believing they were the measure of success. From his corner now, he saw the other side, the disdain reserved for those who didn't belong. Naomi returned with the wine. Setting it down gently, Marcus swirled the glass, inhaling the deep, earthy aroma. He didn't drink immediately. Instead, he looked up at her. "Busy night?" he asked. Her smile tightened. "Every night is busy here." Something in her voice told him it wasn't just the volume of tables weighing on her. Marcus had spent a lifetime reading the unsaid. It was how he negotiated billion-dollar deals, how he spotted weakness in competitors, how he built an empire. And in Naomi's voice, behind her polite tone, he heard strain. A pause stretched between them, almost long enough to be uncomfortable. Then she collected herself, offered another small smile, and excused herself to check on another table. Marcus watched her walk away, her shoes bending at the cracked seams, her posture straight despite the weight pressing on her. For reasons he couldn't fully name, something about her stirred him. Perhaps it was the quiet integrity in how she carried herself, or perhaps it was the unmistakable loneliness in her eyes, one he recognized all too well. Because Marcus knew loneliness. The world saw a billionaire surrounded by staff, investors, admirers, but in truth, every conversation he had was filtered through ulterior motives. Every laugh at his jokes was rehearsed. Every compliment was calibrated. He hadn't had a genuine exchange in years. Even his own boardroom was a hall of mirrors, everyone reflecting back the Marcus they thought he wanted to see. That was why he came here as Mac, to cut through the mirrors, to see who, if anyone, might treat him as simply a man. His steak arrived, the imperial ribeye, seared to perfection, juices glistening under the low amber lights. Naomi set it down carefully, as though presenting a treasure. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and gave the faintest of nods. "No, this is more than enough." But Naomi didn't move right away. Her hand lingered on the tray for a fraction longer than necessary. Then, with a subtle movement, she slid a folded napkin onto the edge of his plate. She didn't meet his eyes. She simply turned, adjusted the tray against her hip, and walked back toward the kitchen. Marcus stared at the napkin. For a moment, he thought it might be a phone number, or a request for help with rent, things he had seen before. But when he unfolded it, the words inside stopped him cold. "The kitchen is not safe." 4 words, that was all. Yet in them was a shadow that stretched beyond this one restaurant, beyond one night. It was a threat not just to his meal, but to everything his empire promised the world. Quality, safety, trust. Marcus folded the napkin again, sliding it beneath his palm as the jazz band shifted into a low, mournful tune. Across the room, Victor, Harlan's eyes swept the floor, sharp and suspicious. And Marcus knew this night was no longer just a ritual of self-reflection. It was the beginning of something far darker. Behind the polished dining room of the Magnolia Flame lay a different world. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, knives clanged against cutting boards. The air thick with grease and heat, but deeper. Still, past the kitchen's chaos, Naomi Carter lived another life one Marcus could not yet see. When her shift ended at midnight, she didn't head home to rest. Instead, she took the last streetcar out of the quarter, past the shuttered jazz clubs and the neon hum of Bourbon Street, into a quieter neighborhood where paint peeled from shotgun houses, and yards sagged under rusted fences. There, in a narrow two-story home barely holding itself together, lived her younger sister Alana. At 15, Alana should have been stressing about exams and prom dresses. Instead, her world revolved around doctor's appointments, oxygen monitors, and bottles of prescription pills. She had been born with a congenital heart defect, an unfair lottery ticket that left her tethered to hospitals more than classrooms. Naomi's life had reshaped itself around her sister's survival. Every double shift, every aching step in shoes worn thin, every smile forced at entitled customers, it was all to keep Alana's fragile heart beating. But the bills were relentless. Hospital stays drained savings faster than Naomi could pour. Coffee insurance only covered fragments. Each month, the numbers in her checkbook blood red. And into that desperate gap slithered Victor Harlan. Victor had noticed Naomi's background. She'd once been a community college student, majoring in accounting, before Alana's worsening condition forced her to drop out. That unfinished education became Victor's weapon. Late at night, when the dining room emptied and the books were closed, Victor would summon Naomi into his office. There, amid shelves of vintage wine and the soft glow of a banker's lamp, he revealed the second set of ledgers. Invoices for prime beef swapped with shipments from unlicensed suppliers. Inventory marked premium when in reality it was barely fit for consumption. Payments rerouted to shell companies Victor controlled. He skimmed profits, laundered money, and cut corners on food safety, all hidden beneath pristine quarterly reports. And Naomi, under threat of losing her job, and therefore Alana's lifeline, was forced to help. Her accounting skills made her valuable. Victor knew she understood exactly what crimes she was enabling. That knowledge became his chain around her neck. "You owe more than you know, Naomi," he would whisper, leaning close enough for her to smell the whiskey on his breath. "That little sister of yours, how long do you think she'll last without your paycheck?" She wanted to scream. She wanted to hurl the ledgers at his smug face and run. But every time she pictured Alana lying pale in a hospital bed, wires attached to her chest, she swallowed her rage. Victor had her cornered. He knew it. Yet Naomi still carried herself with quiet dignity. On the floor, she never let customers see her crack. She served with a steady voice and a smile that masked storms. But under that mask, she fought exhaustion and guilt, her mind spinning with calculations. How long before the lie collapsed? Before she and her sister were ruined? That night, as she slipped the napkin toward Marcus, her pulse thundered in her ears. It wasn't just a warning for him. It was a desperate gamble for herself. If this stranger saw her, really saw her, maybe he could become the crack of light in the cage Victor had built. She didn't know who Marcus truly was. To her, he was just another weary face, another man who didn't quite fit the gilded mold of the restaurant. But something in his eyes, calm, intelligent, quietly challenging, made her believe he wasn't like the others. Meanwhile, Marcus sat back in his corner, the napkin burning in his palm. For words had shifted the ground beneath his feet. "The kitchen is not safe." For years, his empire had promised uncompromising quality. Hearth and Harbor's reputation was the crown jewel of Ellington Group. A whisper of contamination, corruption, or fraud could topple billions in value overnight. But this wasn't about money. Marcus knew that instinctively. The words carried something more, a plea wrapped in a warning. He thought of Naomi's steady smile, her trembling hand, the exhaustion she couldn't quite hide. This wasn't a scam for a quick payout. This was something else, something heavier. Across the room, Victor Harlan prowled like a wolf, eyes sweeping. nostrils flaring as though he could smell betrayal, when his gaze briefly collided with Marcus's. Marcus gave the smallest nod, a gesture almost imperceptible. To Naomi, it had been enough to give courage. To Marcus, it was a signal. "I see you." Back in her tiny home, Naomi tiptoed into Alana's room after her shift, brushing a curl of hair from her sister's forehead as machines hummed softly. Alana stirred, opening tired eyes. "You're late again," she whispered. "Work was busy." Naomi lied gently, "Go back to sleep." But as she sat beside her sister's bed, Naomi's thoughts drifted back to the folded napkin. For the first time in years, she had taken a risk, and as dangerous as it was. A part of her felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. In his hotel room across town, Marcus laid the napkin flat on the desk, staring at the words under the dim light. For him, too, hope stirred, though it came laced with dread. Because if the warning was true, then the rot inside the magnolia flame wasn't just Victor's problem. It was his. And by morning, Marcus Ellington intended to find out just how deep it went. The imperial ribeye arrived on a gleaming white plate, its charred crust glistening beneath the low amber light. Marcus Ellington regarded it with the calm of a man who'd eaten at the world's finest tables. But tonight was different. Tonight this wasn't a luxury meal. It was bait, a litmus test wrapped in seared perfection. Naomi Carter placed the plate in front of him with steady hands, though inside she was anything but steady. Victor Harlan's eyes still burned into her from across the dining room. She could feel his suspicion tracking her every move. One slip, one misplaced word, and he would destroy what little security she clung to. "Anything else for you tonight?" she asked. Marcus looked up from the steak, meeting her gaze. He saw the faint sheen of sweat at her temples, the tiny crack in her smile. "No," he said softly. "This is perfect." But Naomi wasn't finished. As she cleared the side tray, she slipped the folded napkin onto the corner of the bill holder, so discreetly it could have been mistaken for a careless placement. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure the sound filled the room. Then she turned and walked away, back toward the kitchen, her face a mask of calm while dread churned in her chest. Marcus waited until she was gone. Only then did he slide the napkin into his palm, unfolding it beneath the shadow of his wineglass. For words stared back at him. The kitchen is not safe. For a man whose empire rested on trust, on the promise that his brand delivered nothing but excellence, those words were an earthquake. If true, they didn't just threaten a single restaurant. They threatened Ellington Group itself. Marcus's fingers tightened around the note. He glanced across the dining room, where Victor leaned against the bar, whispering to a sommelier. Every few moments, the manager's eyes flicked toward Marcus, sharp and predatory. Marcus saw the aggression in his posture, the way his presence bent staff to silence, and he understood. This wasn't a vague warning. It was a declaration of war. Naomi reappeared, balancing a tray of glasses. Their eyes met briefly. There was no plea in her look, no overt cry for help, just a flicker of courage beneath layers of exhaustion. Marcus gave the faintest nod, an acknowledgement that he had received her message. But she didn't feel safe yet. In the back hall, Victor cornered her near the wine station, blocking her path with his broad shoulders. "What the hell were you thinking?" he hissed, his voice low but edged with fury. That order should have been refused. Naomi's pulse raced. He insisted, "I'll take responsibility." Victor's eyes narrowed. "If he can't pay, it's on you. And if I catch you stepping out of line again." He let the threat dangle, heavy with unspoken consequence. Naomi lowered her gaze, nodding, though every nerve in her body screamed to run. Marcus, watching from his corner, caught enough of the confrontation to see her fear, and something inside him hardened. He had come tonight seeking honesty. Instead, he had stumbled upon rot. He cut into the steak, each slice deliberate, each bite chewed slowly as if nothing were amiss. But his mind spun. Reports from Jordan Price, his coup, had sung praises of this restaurant's flawless operations. Yet here, beneath the varnish, was corruption bold enough to menace staff in plain view. Marcus dabbed his mouth with the napkin, slipped the folded warning into his jacket pocket, and raised his hand. Naomi returned, masking her unease with that same practiced smile. "Yes, sir." "How's the city treating you?" Marcus asked casually, as though he were any other diner making small talk. The question caught her off guard. For a moment, the mask slipped. "It's complicated," she admitted softly. Marcus held her gaze. "I imagine it is." The conversation was brief, almost meaningless to anyone listening. But Naomi felt something shift, a strange sense that this man, scruffy and unremarkable as he looked, wasn't just another customer. He was listening, truly listening, and Marcus, for the first time in years, felt the same in return. She cleared the plate when he finished, moving with the grace of routine. But when she reached for the bill tray, panic surged. Had he taken the napkin? Or had she been too discreet, leaving it to be lost beneath silverware? Marcus saw the question flicker in her eyes. Slowly, he placed his hand over the tray, fingers firm, protective. Their gazes locked, and in that silent moment Naomi knew he had it. The night pressed on, the jazz band sliding into a languid blues number. Diners laughed, glasses clinked. The world spun as usual. But at that small table near the kitchen doors, everything had changed. Marcus Ellington had come disguised as a poor man in search of honesty. Instead, honesty had found him folded into a napkin, whispered by a weary waitress, risking everything. And now, he thought grimly, there was no going back. Marcus Ellington left the Magnolia Flame with the taste of ribeye lingering on his tongue, and the folded napkin heavy in his pocket. The city outside was alive with brass bands and late-night revelers, but for him, the music had gone silent. For words looped endlessly in his mind. The kitchen is not safe. Back in the anonymity of his motel room, Marcus pulled the curtains tight and laid the napkin on the desk like evidence in a trial. He traced the hurried strokes of Naomi's handwriting. With his finger, it wasn't the work of a grifter angling for a payday. It was desperate, trembling, urgent. He picked up his phone and dialed. The line clicked. Marcus, the familiar voice of Jordan Price. His coo sounded groggy but alert. Jordan was the kind of man who could shift from sleep to crisis mode in a heartbeat. "We have a problem," Marcus said. His tone was low, controlled, but edged with steel. "Magnolia Flame. Something's wrong. I need an investigation off." The books, Jordan didn't question immediately. That was part of why Marcus trusted him. Define off the books. No paper trail. No audit alerts. Use the hostile acquisition contractors. I want eyes on supply chains, vendors, managers, especially Victor Harlan. Discretion is everything. There was a pause, then the scrape of papers as Jordan sat upright. "You think it's corruption?" "I don't think," Marcus replied. "I know. A waitress slipped me a note. She risked everything. That doesn't happen unless rot runs deep." Jordan exhaled. "Understood. I'll activate a team. But Marcus, if this goes public without evidence, that's why we'll get evidence tonight." Marcus cut in. His jaw tightened. "Before Harlan realizes the game has changed." Silence. Then Jordan's voice sharpened, transitioning from caution to execution. "I have someone in Chicago. Selena Grant, ex-FBI, specializes in data retrieval and covert entry. If there's a ledger, she'll find it." "Good," Marcus said. "Send her." 2 hours later, a black sedan rolled into the alley behind the motel. The driver's side window slid down. A woman with short, dark hair and eyes like cold steel leaned out. "Mr. Ellington?" she asked. Marcus stepped forward. "Call me Mac." She studied him for a beat, then smirked faintly. "Fine, I'm Selena. Your coup says you want quiet and fast. That's what I do." She popped the trunk, revealing a duffel bag neatly packed with black gloves, lockpicks, and small electronic devices. Marcus glanced at the gear, then at her. "I'm going with you." Selena's brow arched. "You're the billionaire. You pay people like me to get their hands dirty. Tonight, I'm Mac. And Mac doesn't sit on the sidelines." She considered, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. Just don't slow me down." An hour later, Marcus stood in the service alley behind the Magnolia Flame, wearing a janitor's uniform pulled from Selena's duffel. The polyester scratched his skin. The cap hung low over his eyes, and in his hands he pushed a mop bucket that squeaked faintly with every wheel turn. The disguise wasn't glamorous, but it made him invisible. That was what he needed. Selena moved beside him, calm and deliberate. She carried nothing but a spray bottle and rag, the perfect picture of a cleaning woman. Yet every step was measured, every glance precise, as if she were reading invisible. Codes on the walls. They slipped inside through the delivery entrance. The restaurant was closed now, the chandeliers dimmed, the dining room deserted. Only the hum of refrigerators and the low thrum of air ducts filled the silence. Selena guided him toward the manager's office. At the door, she crouched, pulling a slim device from her pocket. Cheap wireless camera. I'll loop it. Give me 30 seconds. Marcus kept watch, leaning on the mop handle like a weary cleaner. His pulse raced, but he forced his breath steady. He wasn't Marcus Ellington, billionaire mogul. He was Mac, a man with something to prove. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, Victor Harlan's office was a shrine to arrogance. Mahogany desk polished to a mirror. Shelves lined with expensive wine. A leather chair too large for the room. And in the corner, a steel safe, squat and unyielding. Selena knelt by it. Combination keypad. He's paranoid, which makes my job easier. Her fingers flew across a small electronic pad, listening for the faintest shifts. Within 2 minutes, the safe gave a reluctant sigh and opened. Marcus leaned closer. Inside lay a thick red ledger, its spine worn from years of use. Selena flipped it open, snapping photos with a hidden camera pen. The pages told the story Naomi had risked everything to reveal. Shipments from unregulated suppliers. Prime beef invoices replaced with cheap, contaminated stock. Money funneled through shell companies, and scribbled notes linking it all back to Victor Harlan. Then came the entries involving Naomi. Her name appeared in shorthand, her handwriting forced into reconciling the fraudulent numbers. It was all their proof of coercion, of blackmail, of her unwilling complicity. Marcus felt fury rise like fire in his chest. This wasn't just theft, it was exploitation. Harlan had turned Naomi's desperation into a weapon. Selena snapped the final photo, closed the ledger, and replaced it exactly as she'd found it. We're done. They slipped out as quietly as they came, blending back into the shadows of the cleaning crew. When the sedan door closed behind them, Marcus finally exhaled. Selena transferred the photos to a secure line for Jordan's analysts. Within minutes, Jordan called back, voice crisp. It's worse than we thought. Tainted supply chains, fraudulent invoices, and leverage over your waitress. Harlan's been feeding poison into your brand. Marcus stared out at the New Orleans skyline, jaw set. Then tomorrow, he said coldly, we end it. Morning broke over New Orleans with a muted gold light, the kind that softened even the city's sharpest edges. But inside Marcus Ellington, nothing felt soft. Fury pulsed, steady in his chest, cold and deliberate. The images from Victor Harlan's ledger had burned into his mind overnight. Toxic meat funneled into his restaurants, fraudulent invoices, blackmail against Naomi Carter. For a man who had clawed his way from nothing to an empire, betrayal was a familiar taste. But this was different. This wasn't a rival trying to undercut him. This was wrought within his own house. By mid-morning, a secure call from Jordan Price confirmed the scope. The ledger matches supplier records we've already flagged as clean, Jordan said, his voice clipped, which means Harlan forged entire chains of documents. If this had reached regulators before us, he let the thought hang. It would have destroyed Ellington Group. Marcus finished. His eyes narrowed as he looked out from his suite. Balcony, Bourbon Street still quiet below. We move today. Public, visible. Make sure the press is ready. Jordan hesitated. And the waitress, Naomi Carter, stays protected, Marcus said firmly. She risked everything to give me that note. If Harlan thinks he can bury her, he's mistaken. At precisely 11:45 a.m., two black SUVs pulled up in front of the Magnolia Flame. The lunchtime rush had just begun. Well-heeled patrons stepping from town cars, expecting the usual choreography of fine dining. Instead, the doors of the SUVs opened, and a tide of power entered the room. Marcus walked first. No disguise this time. No thrift store jacket. No scuffed boots. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, his presence commanding the space. Instantly, behind him came Jordan Price, holding a tablet, and two legal officers, Cameras followed. Word had spread faster than Marcus anticipated. Inside, Victor Harlan's smile cracked the moment he saw who it was. For one heartbeat, confusion flashed. Then the blood drained from his face. He stumbled forward, still attempting the performance. "Mr. Ellington, when an honor, I save it," Marcus cut in. His voice carried like a judge's gavel. The dining room fell silent. Waiters froze mid-step. Patrons craned their necks, whispering. Naomi, holding a tray of water glasses, nearly dropped them when she realized who Mac truly was. Jordan stepped forward, tapping the tablet. Evidence spilled onto the screen. Scanned ledger pages, forged invoices, supplier manifests of condemned meat. He swiped again, still shots from security footage. Victor leaning over Naomi. His words captured in audio transcripts. "That little sister of yours, how long do you think she'll last without your paycheck?" Gasps rippled through the room. Victor's mask shattered. "This is out of context," he sputtered, sweat beading at his temple. "Those records fabricated." Marcus advanced a step, his presence towering. "Enough. I built Ellington Group on the promise of integrity. You poisoned that promise. You poisoned my people." His voice dipped lower, colder, "and you threatened one of them into silence." Naomi stood frozen, her tray trembling in her hands. Tears welled as she watched Victor crumble beneath the weight of truth. She had never believed anyone would stand up for her, not against a man like Harlan. But here it was justice descending in broad daylight. Victor collapsed into a chair, mumbling denials no one believed. Reporters snapped photos, diners recorded video. His empire of intimidation dissolved under the glare of exposure. Marcus turned then not to Victor, not to the cameras, but to Naomi. His expression softened just enough to cut through her fear. "You had every reason to stay silent," he said, voice steady but carrying through the room. "Yet you chose to act, not for money, not for advantage, but because it was right." Naomi's throat closed, tears slipping free. "Your fabricated debt is erased," Marcus continued. "And Ellington Group will establish a medical trust fully funded for your sister's care. For life." A sob broke from her lips, muffled by her hand. Around them, the restaurant staff shifted, some wide-eyed, some quietly relieved. "And as for you, Naomi Carter," Marcus said, his tone lifting, now with rare warmth, "your integrity is wasted waiting tables. Starting today, you'll serve as Director of Ethical Oversight for Ellington Group. You'll make sure no one ever again uses desperation as a weapon in my house." Naomi's knees nearly buckled. Applause broke from the diners, hesitant at first, then swelling into something more. Victor buried his face in his hands as security closed in. For Marcus, the moment held both vindication and revelation. He had set out disguised as a poor man to test the honesty of strangers. Instead, a stranger's honesty had saved his empire. The napkin still rested in his pocket. Its for words etched into his soul. "The kitchen is not safe." She had been right. And because she dared to risk everything, Marcus Ellington had been forced to remember. True wealth wasn't measured in billions. It was measured in the lives you protected. The news traveled faster than fire on a dry wind. By evening, every major outlet in New Orleans and beyond carried the headline, "Ellington Group exposes internal corruption. Restaurant manager arrested for fraud and blackmail." Photos of Victor Harlan being escorted out of the Magnolia Flame in handcuffs flooded social media. The once flawless reputation he had cultivated crumbled into dust in a matter of hours. But for Marcus Ellington, this was not a moment of triumph, it was a reckoning. Naomi's dawn following morning, Naomi Carter sat at a sleek oak conference table inside Ellington Group's regional office. Her nerves jittered, but her eyes were steady. Across from her sat Jordan Price, reviewing the official documents for her new role, Director of Ethical Oversight. "This isn't charity," Jordan told her plainly, sliding the contract across the table. "Marcus doesn't hand out positions. He trusts you because you earned it." Naomi swallowed hard. She thought of Alana, her frail little sister, finally secured by the medical trust Marcus had promised. For the first time in years, Naomi felt air fill her lungs without the crushing weight of fear. She signed her name, her hand trembling not from dread this time, but from hope. Marcus's reflection. Marcus watched from his penthouse overlooking the Mississippi, the skyline glinting in morning light. The napkin lay on his desk, preserved like a sacred relic. He thought of all the boardrooms, all the conferences, all the nights he had worn masks of power, and how none of them had shaken him as deeply as for simple words written by a weary waitress. He realized then that wealth wasn't measured by net worth or global reach. It was measured in choices, the choice to protect the vulnerable, to give dignity where it was stripped away, to rebuild not just profits, but people. In Naomi, he had found the honesty he'd been hunting for all along. She had risked everything, not for herself, but for truth that was worth more than any empire he could buy. The closing scene. Weeks later, the Magnolia Flame reopened under new management. Regulators cleared the chain after thorough inspections, thanks to Naomi's oversight and Marcus's swift action. Patrons returned, reassured that the brand's integrity was stronger than ever. One evening, Marcus walked through the restaurant unannounced, not in disguise this time, but as himself. Diners recognized him, whispers following like shadows. Yet he ignored the attention, heading straight for the back office where Naomi was reviewing reports. She looked up, startled, then smiled. Not the forced, weary smile of a waitress covering fear, but a genuine one. "How's the food tonight?" Marcus asked lightly. Naomi smirked. "Safe, you can trust me on that." For the first time in years, Marcus laughed, a true, unguarded laugh. He realized then that his ritual of disguises might finally be over. He no longer needed to search for honesty in the shadows. He had found it, and it had changed everything. As he left the Magnolia Flame that night, Marcus thought of the napkin. Once more, a warning, yes, but also a promise. The kitchen is not safe. It had been true then. But now, under Naomi's watch, Marcus knew the words meant something new. The empire was safe because it was in the hands of those brave enough to tell the truth. And for Marcus Ellington, that was the greatest wealth of all.